Higher nervous activity is the activity of the higher centers of the central nervous system of animals and man, which ensures the normal and complex relations between the entire organism and the external environment. This concept was first proposed by Russian physiologist, Nobel Prize winner Ivan Pavlov, and it is opposed to the activity of the central nervous system that integrates different organs and parts of the organism. The term higher nervous activity is, according to Pavlov, including all forms of psychic activity, including human thoughts and consciousness. And this study was based on the concept and theory of and findings of Ivan Sechenov, who wrote the book Reflexes of the Brain. So this idea that is in the background of the higher nervous activity is based on the reflexes. The reflex is a response of an organism to the stimulation with participation of the nervous system. So the reflex may be shown as following. Picture: there is stimulus, there is organism, and there is response. So this is the general mechanism of any reflex. Sechenov found that the behavior of an animal, of a human being, in a large extent is based on the reflexes. According to Pavlov, the basis of higher nervous activity in higher animals is conditioned reflexes, which are formed in the higher centers of the central nervous system, in higher vertebrates, and in the man predominantly in the cerebral cortex, in addition to complex unconditioned reflexes that are formed and arise mainly in the subcortical areas, subcortical nuclei. So we distinguish conditioned and unconditioned reflexes. Conditioned and unconditioned reflexes. Again, the difference: unconditioned reflexes are inborn, genetically determined, and are specific for this species of animal. Conditioned reflexes are learned, are produced during the lifespan, and are not constant. Unconditioned reflexes are constant, are stable. Conditioned reflexes may arise and may be inhibited, may disappear, so they are non-stable in the life of an individual. They are not inherited, they are learned. Unconditioned reflexes, mainly subcortical nuclei are involved in the composition. Subcortical nuclei are conditioned reflexes, cortical mechanisms involved. Cortical mechanisms are involved. The perfect adaptation of an organism to the environment depends on the formation and extinction of various conditioned reflexes. What is the biological significance of the conditioned reflexes? Is the adaptation of the body, because conditioned reflexes permit the organism to prepare in time, forecast for favorable events and avoid unfavorable ones. So when conditioned reflexes are produced, the organism behaves forecasting the future event in the environment. We will give an example. Let's take the reflex, for example, that Pavlov developed in an animal, in a dog, when he eliminated the light, when he turned on the light. So the light in the room, and then soon, so 30 seconds after the light, he gave food to the dog. So first light, and then food. So after several repetitions of such composition, so light first, then food, light, food, several days he did this experiment, and then he simply turned on the light and he observed the response. What was the response? The response was the salivation or production of the gastric juice. So the physiological mechanisms of digestion were activated only by light, even without food. So he noticed that when he turned light, the reflex was obvious, because after the light he observed the salivation, even without any food. So this is the conditioned saliva. Okay, now what are the conditions that should be taken into account to produce such conditioned reflex? Okay, again, I want to notice and to stress that organism in such a case reacts to light, forecasting the food in the future. So it increases the adaptation to the environment. It forecasts the events in the future. And by the way, the light in this type of reflex is conditioned stimulus, and food is unconditioned stimulus. So conditioned stimulus induces the reaction when reflex is produced, even without unconditioned stimulation. So now we will name the main conditions to produce conditioning, to produce conditioned reflex. What should be done? So first, you should have a dog. Dog should be healthy. Dog should have no diseases and should not sleep. So also the dog should have motivation for such reflex that we just discussed. Dog should be hungry. Hunger. It's important, because if you will take the dog that is not hungry, you will not be able to produce such reflex, conditioned reflex. Then, two stimulus should be used conditioned and unconditioned. Conditioned stimulus, the light; unconditioned stimulus, for example, the food. Then it is very important that the conditioned stimulus should go before unconditioned stimulation. The time between them should be between, the optimal time, it was found in the laboratory of Pavlov, should be between 1 and 30 seconds. If you will use food 2 hours, for example, after the light, there will be no chance to produce conditioned reflex. Then another thing is that you should repeat such chain of events many times. You should repeat conditioned stimulation and unconditioned stimulus many times before you will notice that conditioned stimulus alone induces the reflex. Another important thing is that you should use the optimal strength of stimulation, and you should use optimal unconditioned stimulation to make this reflex working. For example, if you will not use the lamp but will use a very strong source of light, you will only induce fear in an animal but no reflex. Another thing is that you should avoid any external stimulation that will not make possible for the production of reflex, but will induce orientation of an animal in the space, and the animal will detract from the learning. Pavlov near St. Petersburg used the Tower of Silence to make the elaboration of reflexes most efficient. In complete silence, the reflexes are working very good. Pavlov described 2 signaling systems of an organism. The first signaling system is working well in an animal, in dogs, in monkeys. It is including. It is common in man and animals. It is based on the different stimulations of from the environment, and it is different from second signaling system that is present only in man, because the signals of a second order are based on the words pronounced, heard, and seen, and for man, such signalization became even more important. The word and its power became more even sometimes important than the signalization of the first order, than the first signaling system. Okay. Then also Pavlov used such concept as dynamic stereotype. Dynamic stereotype is a chain of conditioned reflexes that is the base of a learning. For example, driving a car, a person the person is using many reflexes which are linked to each other, and such dynamic stereotypes making possible complex forms of behavior. For example, professional types of behavior. When one conditioned reflex is finished, another is automatically generated and initiated. And another thing is instincts. Instincts are the chains of unconditioned reflexes, which we may see also in animals. For example, parental, the reflex of animals when they take care of their children, when they feed their children, when they trying to find a safe situation, safe place to protect them from predators. So instincts are inborn types of behavior. Next thing that should be discussed is that Pavlov noticed that the reflexes, conditioned reflexes, may be elaborated, may arise, and may disappear. So disappearance of reflexes Pavlov called inhibition in the higher nervous activity. Pavlov noticed that there are several types of inhibition in the higher nervous activity. Inhibition. In the higher nervous activity. It may be external or unconditioned. Unconditioned. And it may be internal. Internal or conditioned. External inhibition may occur when extra strong stimulus is produced and conditioned reflex that worked disappear. For example, if we turn on the light and animals salivate, when very loud noise will be produced, the salivation will stop. Animal will afraid, will look around, trying to find the best solution, and salivation will stop. So this is an example of external unconditioned inhibition of reflexes. Internal may be, for example, of several types. For example, extinction. This type of inhibition, extinction, will happen if you will not use unconditioned stimulus and will only initiate conditioned stimulation. For example, if you will turn on the light and then give food, you will develop conditioned reflex. But if then you will turn on the light and will give no food to the dog once, twice, 3 times, several days, then the volume of saliva produced will gradually decrease and few days after will completely disappear. This type of inhibition is called extinction. Such type of conditioned and unconditioned stimulations. The unconditioned stimulation that reinforces the conditioned stimulus is called reinforcement. So we may say that extinction is produced in a lack of reinforcement of a conditioned reflex. Another type of conditioned internal inhibition we may call the differential inhibition. Differential. In this type of inhibition, for example, any light first induces was reinforced and induced the conditioned reflex, the conditioning, but then you differentiate. For example, green light, if an animal may differentiate the lights, the colors, for example, will be reinforced. Red light will not be reinforced. So after a while there will be differential inhibition when red light will not produce salivation, for example, and green light will induce the conditioned reflex. So by the way, it is not necessarily only use light and food for conditioning. There are different types of conditioned reflexes. You may use different stimulations, not only light, but you may use different noises, different sounds. You may also use tactile stimulations, touch the animal with some object, and you may use different unconditioned situations, different unconditioned reflexes to produce the reflex. Not only food, you may use water, you may use situations of danger which will develop defensive reflex of an animal, for example. Okay, and based on these processes in the higher nervous activity, I mean processes of conditioning and inhibition in the higher nervous activity, Pavlov developed and proved the existence of different types of the higher nervous activity. So next question is the types of higher nervous activity. For the types of higher nervous activity, Pavlov used the classification of Hippocrates. Sanguine type of higher nervous activity is the first type. For classification, Pavlov used three characteristics of the high nervous activity. Strength, first is strength, then lability, how fast the organism may change excitation in the high nervous activity and inhibition in the high nervous activity. Lability and balance between excitation and inhibition in the high nervous activity. So three characteristics. Sanguine type of high nervous activity is strong. What does it mean? Strong means that excitation in the high nervous activity is strong, inhibition is also strong. Balanced type, so strong, balanced, and labile. May rapidly change excitation and inhibition. Okay, again, strong, balanced, labile. Choleric, strong type, not balanced, and labile. Not balanced with prevalence of excitation or inhibition. Choleric. Phlegmatic is strong type, balanced, and inert, not labile. It may not rapidly shift from excitation to inhibition. And melancholics, at least they are weak. So weak type of high nervous activity means that the excitation and inhibition is weak in this type of high nervous activity. Lability and balance are not characterized in this type. The human beings are always a mixture of different type of high nervous activity. Okay, and the last thing that we will discuss is the mechanism of conditioning in accordance with Pavlov hypothesis. There are different hypotheses how conditioned reflexes are produced. So Pavlov idea is that there is temporary link between different parts of the cortex, of the brain cortex, during conditioning. Okay, this is the brain, and we will indicate the stimulation of the occipital cortex by the light. So when, for example, the lamp turns on, the occipital cortex is activated. And then, after a while, the food is given. So it stimulates different receptors, for example, the receptors of the tongue, smell also induces the activation of different part of the cortex, of the some of the sensory cortex, for example. And in this case, the hunger becomes more important, and there is dominant principle of dominance in the brain. Hunger induces the strong activation of the somatosensory cortex, and the special bond, special link is produced between two parts of the cortex, and the excitation after a while of the occipital cortex by the light is attracted by the dominant part of the cortex, and after a repetition of light and food, we simply turn on the light, and due to this temporary link, temporarily because it may extinct, there is inhibition, extinction, we will have the reaction of the salivary glands.